Hello, good evening, everyone. I want to say good evening to North America and also good morning to Asia Pacific region. My name is William Wei, and I'm professor of international business at MacEwan University, and also the president of Hong Kong Canada Business Association, Edmonton section here in Alberta, Canada. On behalf of HKCBA, I would like to welcome our speakers today. We have 5 speakers and all the audience coming from different parts of the world for today's webinar. Before we start the formal program, please allow me to introduce HKCBA, who provided its platform for today's event. HKCBA, for many people already known, has been a pillar in supporting the commercial relationship between Canada and Hong Kong SAR, as well as throughout Asia Pacific region. Founded in 1984, HKCBA is one of Canada's largest nonprofit and non-governmental trade association, with over 1,000 members across 8 Canadian cities. HKCBA provides Canadian firms with crucial market intelligence and also important connection through partnership with Hong Kong family of organizations representing governmental agencies in Canada and in Hong Kong, as well as a lot of key private sector supporters. And we all know that we have about 300,000 Canadians living in Hong Kong and working in Hong Kong today. This webinar will have 3 components. For the first hour, each of the speakers will give a viewpoint presentation on Rcep and CAI, which recently signed between a couple of Asian Pacific countries, mostly China, Japan, Korean, ASEAN countries. And the other one is the European Union-China Comprehensive Agreement on Investment. After the presentation from each of our speakers, they will briefly debate on what is the best Canadian strategy, particularly business strategy to Asia Pacific. And at the very last, we will open up and the audience will have opportunity to ask questions, and there will be a 30 minutes question and answer period. So without further ado, I will introduce our moderator for the first and second part, Professor Juan Mcintyre. Dr. Juan Mcintyre is the founding executive director of Georgia Tech Center for International Business Education and Research, which is a national center of excellency in the States. He is a professor of management in the Scheller College of Business, with also a courtesy appointment in international relations in Georgia Tech School of International Affairs. He received State of Georgia Governor's International Award in IB Education, the French National Order of Merit, the Georgia Tech-wide Faculty Award for Business, and he also received honorary doctorate degree from University of Lorraine and also honorary professor down there. He was one of the co-founder of the Chinese Globalization Association and also the founder of the Multinational Enterprise and Sustainability Association. Obviously, he's an expert in European Union. He speaks several European languages, including French, Italian, and Spanish. And he told me many years ago, he was a graduate student in international relations at McGill University here in Canada. So let's welcome Professor Juan Mcintyre. Thank you.
Thank you, William. It's with great pleasure that I can participate and join you from Atlanta and take part in this program with the Hong Kong Canada Business Association and with you, William. My role tonight is fairly simple, other than being a timekeeper, and I hope the participants will be kind to me and allow me to interrupt them. First and foremost, it is to introduce you and perhaps ask a few relevant questions using perhaps a US perspective. We are going to start this meeting with Ambassador Ron Hoffman. Ron, whom I am going to introduce, will be leading off. We may be joined by Dr. Henry Wang at some point. At this point, we will complete the first presentation and go to Dr. Juan. So let me say a few words about Ron, and having just met him, I've had a chance to really learn about his multifaceted life. He comes out of the Canadian Diplomatic Service and served as an ambassador. Correct me, Ron, if I make a mistake. I believe you were based in Thailand and accredited for Laos and Cambodia. You also had a role in Afghanistan, but more importantly, perhaps, for the event this evening, he is the COO of Investment Alberta Corporation, and is served in the past as Alberta's senior representative to the Asia Pacific Basin from year 2014 through 2020. While in Hong Kong, he was elected vice chairman of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce for a period of 4 years, and spent more than 25 years in the Canadian Diplomatic Service, as I indicated, in various parts. Trade Commissioner, Director General of Strategic Policy, I assume this was at the Ministry of External Affairs, and Senior Advisor to various foreign ministers. Is served in 6 countries, as I indicated, but importantly in China, in the United Kingdom also, in the Netherlands, in South Africa. I think he knows the ASEAN region as well as one could expect. So it's a pleasure to introduce him. I want to remind participants that they have about 10 minutes so that we can stick to schedule. So Ron, the floor is yours to really open up the debate.
Well, Dr. McIntyre, William, thank you so much for inviting me to say a few words to maybe frame the discussion over the next hour and a half or 2 hours. I do have to say this is, it's a deep honor to be part of this expert panel. In many ways, I don't feel I belong with such a group of deeply knowledgeable experts on the region, given your sort of deep experience and research in the area. But I'm delighted to be part of it. The timing of this discussion is very, very important. Not only the timing, but also the format of this discussion. It is very difficult to have a discussion, a dispassionate, sober, objective discussion on Canada and Asia these days, given the deeply emotional kind of state of Canada-China relations. It's hard to have a discussion without emotion rising to the top, without many Canadians expressing anger over some aspects of recent developments, including the detainment and treatment of Canadians on the ground. So I think bringing people together that can step back, that can look at this in a more holistic, comprehensive, and far-reaching way is critical to take place in the context of very emotive headlines and sort of politicization of the discussion. So I'm thrilled to be able to be part of it. Look, if I can just highlight maybe a few things that are very much sort of on my mind when I think of Canada and the world. Number one is many Canadians, we're in the northern tip of North America. And I think it's very easy for many Canadians, unless they're actually involved in diplomacy or international business, to maybe lose sight of the fact that the world is changing as quickly as it is, that the global center of gravity, whether it's commercial, political, human, is shifting increasingly to Asia. It's also, for Canadians, it's a challenge to grasp that in most of our history, our principal trading partners have been like-minded in a lot of ways. Whether it was Great Britain and Europe, and then eventually, and then the shift to the United States, we're always dealing with common cultures and language and legal systems. So it's for the very first time in our history that one of our principal economic partners and entities with whom we engage has a different culture, different political system, is further away, and Canada's never had to deal with that before. So for us, as Canadians, we've always been dependent on the external environment. We remain very dependent today, and in some respects, we're becoming more dependent for international capital, talent, export of goods, import of technology, global value chains as we're integrating in the global economy. And China and Asia are increasingly central to our national interest. You know, in our diplomacy, in many ways, Canada is sort of a teenager in diplomatic terms compared to many countries. Our diplomacy in a lot of respects has been relatively straightforward and unchallenged. For the first time, we're facing a need now to have a much more complex, nuanced, multifaceted diplomatic strategy. And we're still grappling with how we can do that in terms of dealing with a country like China in particular. So Rcep and the EU-China Comprehensive Investment Treaty are sort of illustrations for us that, you know, much of the rest of the world recognizes that they're also dealing with countries that are very different approaches and different styles and different political systems. But some other countries are able to manage what we have struggled with, and that is advancing our national interests with a region like Asia and in a bilateral relationship like China in a way that allows us to assert and express our values and interests, deal with disagreements, while at the same time advancing the realities that we have become dependent on a part of the world over the last 20 years that we're less familiar with. You know, many Canadians don't fully understand that the Asian region has risen dramatically and continues to. It's not just a case of numbers, it's a case of transformation. We look at countries like Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand. You know, it's not just China itself, although the transformation of China over the last 30 years, I think, is unprecedented in human history. How the human condition of hundreds of millions of people have changed so dramatically from a largely agrarian and relatively poor country to one that is now mostly urban, mostly middle class, and industrially very sophisticated. So, you know, even before Rcep, most Asians are trading more with one another than with the rest of the world. Rcep is going to deepen those realities, particularly with its emphasis on common sort of national rules of origin, which will further drive the dynamics under their value chains. We're kind of outside of that system and trying to understand and grapple with it. But it's vital that we do so, I think, because if Canadians don't figure out how to manage our disagreements with the region, but also advance our national interests tied to the region, and to do that concurrently, I think we're going to risk a declining prosperity as a nation. We do not have a choice but to deal with Asia, and we do not have a choice but to deal with China in Asia, and we have to figure out how to do it. The competition is becoming stiffer. The global economy is dramatically changing. And I think Canadians have to understand that we need a policy and a strategy and an ability to engage that just sort of deals with those realities. Rcep and the Canada-EU, or the EU-China investment agreement, have just demonstrated that the rest of the world is managing that, and we have to understand how to do that as well. Maybe I'll just leave it with that kind of very broad framing. I think we can talk about how to do that, and I think there will be many ideas around the table. And I know the 300 plus participants in the HKCBA and our friends of the HKCBA. There's a deep experience among the membership, and I think it's just we're lucky to have an HKCBA to help foster this debate and contribute to this as Canada tries to figure out how to manage itself and its interest in a very, very rapidly changing world.
Excuse me, Professor McIntyre, you're
Yes.
mute.
Thank you, Ambassador Hoffman. Thank you, Ron. for these comments, framing comments. We have agreed among the participants to hold off questions until all have had a chance to speak. There will be questions, as William indicated, among the panelists, and then there will be a chance for a more general set of questions from the audience in attendance. So thank you, Ron. We next turn to our invited guest, distinguished speaker, Dr. Henry Wang, who has just joined us. Thank you. And it falls to me to introduce you. So it's my pleasure to do it. Dr. Wang is the founder and president of the Center for China and Globalization, CCG. I've known about your center for a long time. I think you were founded in 2008, if my memory serves me right.
Yes.
It's a governmental think tank in China, and it has the distinction of being ranked among the top 100 think tanks in the world. Now, Dr. Wang is a unique participant tonight. He plays several policy advisory roles in China, and I note that he is a counselor of state in the State Council and a vice chairman of the China Association for International Economic Cooperation, which falls under the Chinese Ministry of Commerce. He has also served in several other positions, and I will just highlight a few of those. He is a steering committee member of the Paris Peace Forum. I actually have met the founder some month ago, and a member of the Migration Advisory Board, International Organization of Migration of the United Nations. He is also the Dean of the Institute of Development Studies of China, based at the Southwestern University of Finance and Economics. I think the abbreviation is SWUFE, S-W-U-F-E. I am sure I'm mispronouncing it. And I believe you are based in the wonderful city of Chengdu in Sichuan. Is that correct? I think it is.
Yeah.
And you're also a member of the Duke Kunshan University Advisory Council. And here I will recall my dear friend Dennis Simon, who was the founder, executive VP, now back in at Duke University as special advisor on China to the president of Duke University. So without further ado, having hopefully done justice to you, we turn to you for your wisdom. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Dr. McIntyre, and of course, thanks, William, also HKCBA for inviting me. You know, it's really a great honor to be with such a great panelist today at this conference. Actually, I'm very familiar with Canada because I studied in Canada. I spent early part of my working career in Canada, worked in Toronto, Montreal, and also worked with Canada in Hong Kong. So I have fond memories of Canada, being a student and trained and you know, part of my life there. So what I would like to share is that I think the topic today is excellent. You know, from Rcep, CAI to what next. So what I would like to say is that I actually, you know, really echo quite a few Ambassador Hoffman's comment there. You know, I mean, Asia is an enormous growing market now. What I also wants to say is that the Rcep has been signed with very fascinating timing. You know, it has been negotiated for 7-8 years, but then it has been signed actually during the window of this transition from President Trump to Biden. You know, after Biden wins the election, you know, all the countries actually in ASEAN and also Japan, Korea, Australia, New Zealand, and actually all of them quickly decide they have to, you know, sign. It has been negotiated for a long time, but so that will create the largest free trade zone in the world, right? With probably 30% of the global the GDP and global trade. It's enormous trade path that has been put in place. And then we have also during the same period, the last day of last year, 2020, China-European comprehensive agreement on investment has been signed again. So this is paved the huge opportunities for the China-European investment and business in the future. The reason, I think, one of the reasons those signs, as I indicated, Asian is really on the top of engine of the world now. I'm sure that by the next 5 to 10, 15 years, Asia will lead the global growth. So this can be seen actually not only from the economic side, but also for the regional side as well. I mean, ASEAN is now the largest trading partner with China. It's believe it or not, and then of course Japan, Korea also. China is the largest trading partner. One of the things I think, one of the key drive for that is China's growth is enormous as well. I can give a bit of introduction on that. For example, this year is very special. This year is China finished the first centennial objective to by 2020. China has achieved lift extreme poverty out of the Chinese rural areas, and also China now start a new 14th five-year plan, which they will emphasize a lot of innovation and technology development as well. And also China has actually set up a vision for 2035, starting from this year, which by 2035, China will double its GDP of the current status. And by 2049, which is the second centennial objective, China will build into a modern society. So I think there's a lot of internal objective has been set, which China is going to strive forward. And China is really, I live in China. I mean, last year I haven't been able to go anywhere. I travel extensively in China, which is now COVID-19 has almost no impact. I'm now in Shenzhen actually, attending another Phoenix and Shenzhen government conference. But basically you see that China now has also, the trade has been growing very fast. China now has is become the largest trading partner with 130 countries. Just during the COVID-19 years, China's export has actually increased. Trade has been increased. China has 12,000 China-European trains, cargoes, which has doubled. It has actually increased 20% in pandemic year. Almost it's so you can see the traffic between China and the Asian traffic between Europe are extremely busy. So that's really where it happened. Because, for example, the European business, why they have to really in favor of signing this China AI investment treaty is because all the European companies are doing business in China, and their market share even larger than what they have back home. For example, all the automobiles, you name it, Volkswagen, BMW, Daimler, Mercedes, or Peugeot, or whatever, Toyota, whatever, they all have their big market in China. And then also the business opportunity is enormous. Tesla last year almost become the largest company in the world because they have a huge factory in China, operates at in full capacity. So you see the market is booming, and then now China has created a 400 million middle class. Now 800 million has been lifted out of poverty, and you can imagine, this country is so well now efficient now. It's anywhere you go is a few hours by fast train. China has 2/3 of global speed train. So the total length of China's speed train is the next 10 countries combined, and also China has 1 billion smartphone users. Everybody is almost having an ERP, and then they can operate that and greatly increase the efficiency, reduce the waste of the time, and also China has 4.6 million 4G stations, another almost 1 million 5G stations. So China is internet plus, AI plus is gradually going to happen. And China leads also. I think that China, US now have some common ground now, because President Biden said, okay, we're going to compete with China. He didn't use the rivalry, he says competitor. Okay, compete with China, but also whenever possible can collaborate. Foreign Minister Wang said the same thing at the NPC news conference. We're going to recognize there's a competition now. First time for China to say that. And then also there's where to cooperate, for example, on the climate change. I'm sure President Xi probably will participate in President Biden's Earth Day Summit in next month. What I can see is even on clean energy, China is leading. China is largest solar panel producer, largest clean car producer, largest wind power, wind power producer. So I'm just giving you some examples. I see the business potential, the biggest market for China is really difficult for anybody to neglect. I want to come back a bit to Canada, actually. I mean, I have fond memories of Canada. Where I'm also still advisor of Richard Ivey Business School on the board of the Asia. So Canada is really a very unique position. Canada has such excellent relation with China. Trudeau, Pierre Trudeau, actually recognized China earlier than any other countries, Western countries, one of the earliest to recognize China. And the diplomatic ties with Canada was almost 50 years already, over 50 years already. I mean, Norman Bassoon is a household name in China. In my memory, when I first went to primary school, the first foreigner I know is Norman Bassoon, because Chairman Mao said he's a great hero. So you see, the goodwill of Canada in China is enormous, and also that Canada trade with China is crazy. Canada participates in many areas. I used to work with the SNC Lavaland. I mean, we participate in China many projects, including Three Gorges project, and also I worked as the chief representative for Quebec government in Hong Kong. I mean, I know how busy those days that Canada-China ties are enormous. The bilateral student, China is sending the largest student sending country to Canada. Of course, investors too. I mean, also the percentage of Canadians in Canada, Chinese Canadians in Canada, is the highest in the G7 countries. If you're talking about percentage, there's 2 million or whatever, compared with 30 million population. That it's there's only 5 million, Chinese American in the U.S., but there's almost 2 million in Canada. That's enormous. So, so the goodwill, everything is there, and so it's very unfortunate that we see, as I see Ambassador Hoffman said, that the incident happened in both countries. I can see, Canada actually, I mean, I think probably at the beginning made some probably incorrect assessment. And then, whereas Madame Mon has been traveling to all the European countries, nobody really taking any actions on the US request, but Canada did. But of course, I know that China is handling things on their own jurisdiction as well. But we hope that in both countries, cases can be sorted out. I mean, can be ideally settled. I really hope for that. So let's hope for the best. But again, what I'm saying is now, I think the ties between Canada and China is still great. We have there's so much people familiar both countries. There's no geopolitical conflict. Canada is such a peaceful, loving country with such a great, unique, multicultural, whatever. My vision is that I think that future trade and culture and economic activity in China, Canada will be enormous. Will continue because you have so much goodwill among countries. Also, the Canadian diaspora living in Hong Kong, living in Southeast Asia, in China is the largest. You have your overseas diaspora living in other parts of the world. Asian and China and Greater China is probably the largest concentration of that. So with that such a talent circulation between two places, I'm sure things will pick up again. I really hope, confident of that. The goodwill is there, even though we are encounter contemporary challenges and difficulties. Finally, I would like to say, I really hope that Canada could join RCEP, because RCEP is a trade for Asia Pacific. But let's make it open. Canada could join that. But again, also that Canada is a key country of CPTPP. It's TPP. CPTPP is even a higher standard, with all the service trade and everything. Center for China, we've been pushing for China to join CPTPP for the last 6 years. We're actually very active on that. So we hope that we with Canada play a key role there. Well, I have invited the Australian trade minister to come to my office, made a speech. Australia welcomed China to join CPTPP. We also met Singapore ambassador, New Zealand ambassador, Japanese ambassador. all the TPP members, Chile and they also showed some kind of interest into welcome China. So I really hope that Canada can welcome China to join CPTPP as well. So if China joins TPP, it will be really a higher standards that we really promoting the regional trade, so that we have a Asia Pacific with across Pacific, the two largest continent, that really we can make a lot of things happen. We'll be forging the largest trade path in the world. So that really solve a lot. Also, we can invite US. I mean, US is the founding member of that, but Trump withdraw. But maybe Trump can, US can come back again. So we can talk a lot of things in a peaceful manner through the multilateral platform, rather than we're having a major trade war. We're sanctions on each other. We do all those things. I think that we should really pursue multilateralism. I see multilateralism is reviving. And Canada is a great power for that. I mean, Canada also on the WTO 20, Canada had Ottawa 20, Canada has many multilateral rules, Canada is an active player. So multilateralism is really great for Canada. And Canada is bilingual and all those good advantages they have. And with also, particular goodwill between China and Canada. So really, I hope this webinar really hold that timely, and I really thank organizers, and I appreciate that, and I hope my comments are interesting. But also I have to apologize. I may have to leave early because I have a conference going downstairs. But really, I'm really great to see John and all the friends, Xiaohua and Wei, Howard, and all those great panelists, and I really look forward to keep at you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Do you have time for 2 questions, do you think, before you take off?
Sure, absolutely. I can, absolutely.
I will turn to my panelists. Perhaps Ron wants to raise a question.
Sure.
Perhaps Dr. Wang wants to raise a question, and then we will proceed, but we understand you have to leave. So Ron, do you want to unmute and raise a question?
Sure, look, happy to. I mean, and it's wonderful to see Dr. Henry Wang again. We've had past contact over many, many years ago, so it's nice to be reconnected. But I mean, Dr. Wang, I guess the situation, the juncture we're in now, and you pointed to this well, is Canada and China have a growing number of common and shared interests, whether it's climate change is a great example, national energy security, food security, management of the, our shared interests in the Arctic and so forth. So there are many very complex, timely, important areas of discussion where it makes sense for both countries to engage. At the same time, a contradictory force is a growing number of disagreements. I mean, our values are very dear to Canadians, and we hold them, we put great primacy on them on matters of regional security, the South China Sea, human rights, the treatment of Canadians, our view of China's consular international legal responsibilities on consular matters. So we have a growing set of common issues at the same time as a growing set of disagreements. So my question to Dr. Henry Wang would be, what can both sides do to manage these sort of opposing sets of forces in a way that preserves respective interests, helps us manage and maybe resolve some of the conflicts, while at the same time deepening our ability to engage on common interests? We are right now not managing that on both sides, I think, very well.
Yeah, thank you, Ambassador Hoffman. I agree with you. There's really very unfortunately the last 2 years we see this great divide that being happening. But I think there are several reasons for that. I think first of all, it's Trump probably has done quite a bit of damage on that, because he pursued a very hostile policy on China, which I think impacted allies and Western countries. Second is also probably China is growing too fast in the last number of years. I mean, every year China is adding another Australia GDP to its total. So you also, I think also on the Chinese part, there's not enough explanation. The narrative needs to be updated and has to really more forthcoming in communicating rather than only very narrow channels on that. So, but also one thing I noticed that this time at the Alaska meeting, I noticed Director Yang, which said that China also hold the value of peace, development, prosperity, also democracy, human rights, and things like that. So I think what China has been doing, if I can maybe interpret a bit of that, is that China has really changed a lot. China's gone up, and as I just said, China now is already the second largest economy, and also is pandemic fighting. China is the only country in the world, major economy in the world, has recorded the positive GDP. China has actually contributed over 50% of global GDP last year. So that comes with a bit of confidence, I suppose. China is probably growing up a little bit. It used to be child, everybody's criticizing and everybody's scoping, but now China has grown up a little bit. So it's probably a bit more confident and assertive. I think that probably naturally comes with China's status on that. So there's a problem of that. That's what has actually Minister Yang said at Alaska. China, certainly a lot of areas need to be improved. Xinjiang and Hong Kong, whatever, not perfect, never perfect. But for the case of Hong Kong, we see more stability now. Business are back, stock market is rising. We don't have the chaotic situation. Storm the legislature, just like riots on the Capitol Hill. So that's not happening anymore. So, but of course, it's not the ideal situation, but it's better than chaotic. I mean, business probably welcome that. Second, on Xinjiang as well. I mean, we never know where this 1 million, 2 million, 3 million Uyghurs locked up comes from. There's no evidence. There's no leakage of that. We haven't seen anything of that. And but of course, China already said, the trainees they had in the education school has already been graduated in 2019. So the thing is really to invite more ambassadors to come and visit and to take them around. There's already many ambassadors going there. Now China is trying to invite European ambassadors. I would encourage you when the new American ambassador come, China should invite. So maybe it take time to correct that image. China has realized there's a lot of criticism on that, and I'm sure it's doing all its best. But we can't go back to a few videos or a few accounts and just categorize that 1 million has been locked up. So I think there's a bit of difference on that. And we even put the name of genocide, to China, which is only when we hear that we associate with Hitler, with Saddam. We never thought about peaceful, loving China can do that. So that's a different thing. What I guess Chinese government is saying. Look, we have been leaving 800 million people out of poverty. Now you go to China, in any city you go, there's no beggars, there's no homeless. There's no extreme poverty. Whereas probably in the US, you still have a racial discrimination. Black is lives matters, and homeless somewhere you still can encounter. So what about you? What Minister Yang said, what's your qualification to criticize us? So I think, what China wants is have a little equal footing. All has problems, but let's not really just picking my problem all the time. I mean, that's probably the mentality I would assess. So if you talk about, lift 800 million out of poverty, that's probably the largest human rights development that achieved in history. So what we see now in the 1% of Wall Street is equal to the wealth of the 1% of Wall Street is equal to 40-50% of a massive population in the US. The gap is wider and wider. That's where the problem is, and China has been able to avoid that. Eliminate extreme poverty. So I think that there's a lot of things for China to do, to explain, to get along. So I really hope that China can explain better, have a new narrative. But I really hope there's more foreigners come to China. The foreigners come to China still at the level of a 2008 Beijing Olympic. There's no increase for the last 12 years. Whereas China's outbound tourists has explosive, 150 million people going out to China every year. before pandemic. There's only 20 million foreigners come to China. So we should come and see, what has been happening. And also we need to expand exchanges. We should have more Canadian students come to China. There's 400 Chinese students in the US. There's only 10,000 US students in China. So it's largely, we also should resume the Fulbright scholar system. We should resume the journalist, the exchanges, all the things we should do. I really think that there's such a great potential for China and Canada. And I apologize that maybe I explained too much. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Juan. William, do we have time for just one more question?
Yes, I have a question coming from the audience. Asking,
so is Dr. Eddie Wong willing to give up his time?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so let's go with the audience, and then that will be your last question, Dr. Wong.
For sure. The question is coming from indigenous groups. They're asking, will China be interested in investing on some of the Canadian infrastructure and mega projects in the coming years? For example, partnership with indigenous people on building refineries in northern Alberta, which is a long time on hold. So the question is basically talking about Chinese interest in investing in Canada. Thank you.
Absolutely. I mean, Canada is such a beautiful, peaceful, and attractive country. I mean, it has such a great, reputable name in China. Is Vancouver and many cities has been rated the most livable cities in the world for many years. So that's that. You don't need marketing for that. Also, as I said, the percentage of the Chinese elite and all those students in Canada is probably highest in the world. So I'm sure they will be interested to invest. But given I don't know what about current environmental situation, but if allowed by the Canadian government, I'm sure Chinese has a huge capital. They don't know where to invest. I mean that they should definitely come to Canada. For example, just Huawei, I noticed that Huawei used to, Ren Zhengfei said he's going to invest 1 billion or 2 billion in Canada, going to create thousands of jobs. Still, the Huawei R&D center in Ottawa is one of the largest, they said, outside China. So they can create a lot of opportunities and also rural areas for the telecommunications and things like that. So if we really abandon some of those geopolitical dispute, and we focus on the trade and the economic development, I mean, the world will be much safer and more friendly. So I think I see Biden comes up. There's been revival now on multilateralism, on business interests, because everybody has suffered from the trade war. For example, the U.S. General Chamber of Commerce issued a report. Trade war will cost them 0.5 to 1% GDP of the U.S. and lose several 100,000 jobs. So again, same for Canada. I really think that such a big country, Canada is the second largest geographically in the world. I mean, only have 30 million people. It's enormous opportunity ahead. We welcome all the investment, including China. I'm sure China will be extremely interested in that.
Thank you, Dr. Wang.
Thank you. So on behalf of the Hong Kong Canada Business Association and all of the participants, thank you very much for this excellent tour d'horizon of all the pending issues raised by the trade agreement. And we have to let you go, but you're most welcome to stay with us longer if you wish.
I'll try to stay for a while, yeah.
Okay. We next turn to our next participants, and it's my pleasure to introduce him, Dr. Howard Lin, Director of the Canada-China Institute for Business and Development, a professor at the Rogers School of Management, Ryerson University in Toronto. He's an economist in the International Business Department with the Bank of China in Beijing at some point. Director also of the International Business Assistance Program at the Center for International Trade Development in Stillwater, Oklahoma. So you have a US experience there. You currently serve as chief of the Journal of Small Business and Entrepreneurship. So it's a pleasure to have you to follow up and share thoughts with us.
Thank you, John. Yeah, it's nice debate. Yeah, so that's supposed to be. I remember I studied economics in China 20 years ago. So I remember at the time, so there's no pure economics, just political economics, right? So everything, economics related. So it's nice debate. Everybody have concern, since uncertainty related to the timing. I think Ron just mentioned. I think I just want to make a quick comment on the Aboriginal people, the First Nation friends. So I graduated from the China's Nationality University. Basically, it's a hub, education hub for First Nation in China. So I know this, we have a lot to share. So a couple years recent, there actually delegation from Canadian First Nation to China to exchange idea about First Nation entrepreneurship. So I know there's Chinese oil company also already talk with the First Nation group in Canada about those potential investment opportunities. So yeah, this is good practice. We have a lot area can collaborate. So I think today we talk about economic implications of this two agreement. I think I'm no expert on this, especially the first one, the RCEP. Everybody knows there's 20 chapters, 500 more pages. I couldn't comment on the details, but my impression is that this is a very significant event for Canada. Why? So some people said, those countries already have a bilateral trade agreement. There's nothing new. But this is not true. You look at the members, this agreement. So you got for Canadian point of view, we have a second and a third largest trading partner in the group, China and Japan. More significantly, more seriously, our major competitors in Asia included in the agreement. So Australia and New Zealand. So that's a significant threat, I would say, to Canada if we're not actively engaged. I read the report. So talk about a Canadian top export in Southeast Asia. So among the top 30, our export, we have more than half those categories. We have a competitive advantage against Australia and New Zealand. So you think about this implications. So even there's a political tension between, for example, Australia and China. This gives actually another way to engage, right? Yeah, so if we're not there, so there's a danger we will lose those competitive advantage. But more significantly is about the supply chain. So things like a country of origin, Canada, we have a lot of intermediate trade. That means we're not a part of that. Our competitor will hold on or strengthen their position among the members countries in that region. So Canada will lose not just direct trade competition, but also more significantly in the value chain, in the supply chain in the region. Yeah. So that's my impression for this RCEP. So if this is a direct threat, let's talk about CAT, CAI. So I think that agreement for Canada, there's no direct economic implication. The significant is a reference point. So we use that, we can compare the investment agreement with China currently we have, right? So remember when we signing that agreement, not everybody regrets, said that they criticize, said that we don't have that, we don't have this. The CAD is most aggressive, this kind of agreement China ever had with a foreign entity. So we can't regret, because when we talk about that trade investment agreement, the situation, the relationship, the narrative between Canada and China is totally different. So now we see they have things like environmental clause. China need that too, right? So we try to make a reference, say, how can we do better? What's the practical next step as a remedy, to maybe get some deal as good as this CAD. So I just want to stop here. This is kind of my impression, so we can talk about the details later.
Thank you, Howard. I know we're not supposed to ask questions now, but I was tempted to ask you, and I will defer on that, a question on opportunities for small, medium-sized businesses, the proverbial SMEs and the global startups. Perhaps you can think about that as we move towards the Q&As.
Sure.
And to that, thank you very much. We next move to Dr. Eddie Wong, whom I bypassed after having offered you a question and then, of course, totally ignored you. I apologize. So briefly, I think almost everyone knows you. You're currently the Associate Dean for International at Alberta School of Business, University of Alberta, and a founding member of HKCBA. You're a recipient of the Governor General's Medallion, of the Chongqing Friendship Award in 2013. You're a researcher, a practitioner of international business, and you have also received the Garner Témoin Award by the International Federation of Purchasing and Supply Chain Management. So you have a great deal of experience in practical matters, business practical matters, but also in the world of academia. So the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, John, for that kind introduction. First of all, I'd like to thank Ambassador Hoffman and Dr. Lin for painting a very good framework for me to present my views. And I guess just like Dr. Lin said, I'm not the biggest expert on this particular topic, but at the same time, I have done some research and some reading on how Rcep is going to affect Canada, because of the fact that I have been looking at Canada's role and Canada's trade policy in Asia for quite a few years now. And often when I look at Canada's role and how we approach Asia, we often do it at a very, very high policy level, and we never really look at the details. I think this is where I want to make a contribution today. When we look at RCEP or Rcep, at one level, it is nothing more than a harmonization of all the free trade agreements that have existed in Asia today. So in the short term, it's not going to have a big impact on Canada, but it is the longer term. It is a signaling effect that I think is very important to us. What does it tell us about Asia? Particularly, what does it say about our policy in Asia? And on that particular point, I would submit that RCEP really points out Canada's weaknesses in Asia. We can talk about all the trade agreements that we have around the world, but when it comes to Asia, our cornerstone, the cornerstone of Asia policy seems to be the CPTPP, Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership. But given the fact that the United States is not there anymore, that is no longer really an adequate vehicle for us to approach the Asian market. Sure, we have a free trade agreement with Korea, but that does not really overshadow the fact that our biggest trading partner in Asia is China. China is the #1 trade partner of all the RCEP members except for Vietnam, where's number 2. And so with Rcep emerging, what does that tell us? Now, obviously, we need to look at our policy. Obviously, we need to be part of that trading community as well. But it would take time. But aside from gaining market access, focusing on the trade policy or the trade agreement aspect, the one thing that I would like to maybe put forward, a question I'd like to put forth is really, can we compete? I understand that there are studies saying that we have a number of commodity within which we have competitive advantages, and there's no doubt it's true. Particularly from the standpoint of Western Canada, it's very important. Most of the product that we can compete in come from Western Canada. So this particular agreement is extremely important from the standpoint of Western Canada. Okay? But at the same time, the productivity question is also very important, because with Rcep, one of the results would be an increase in productivity because of the rationalization of the supply chains, because of the integration of the consumer markets. They will become more productive. They will have a higher level of efficiency. What does that mean for us when we're sitting outside of this particular agreement? And the one concerning piece of information that I would put on the table is the fact that when it comes to non-energy goods in the United States, Canada's market share has been declining since the year 2000. In 2000, we had 16% of the market in the United States. In 2017, we had 10.2%. So we have a productivity problem. So for Canadian businesses and government entities who want to look at Asia as a future prospect, we really, first of all, have to look at how do we deal with the productivity problem. We can sign more agreements, but it's not going to change very much. Okay? Because when we're looking at Rcep, okay, you're looking at a group of countries that are very, very manufacturing oriented, and one of the important feature of Rcep is the fact that the regional value content is only 40%. What that tells us is that Rcep is focusing on manufacturing. They want to stimulate the manufacturing sector through Rcep, and at the same time, they want to increase the global supply chain role in the world. Okay. And when we look at the agreement from that perspective, Dr. Lin's question is really well taken. How can we fit into the supply chain of these countries? We need to do that. But to do that, we have to have a clear idea as how we're going to compete. Now, it will take time for us to be part of that. But I think at the same time, in the very near term, the question of our productivity is really, really important. And also as a country, I would also ask the Canadian business community to actually reflect on the fact that today's economy, as Ron pointed out, is based on based on a system that is evolving. It's no longer based on Western values. It's not based on one set of values that we have lived by for 20, 30, 40 years. Things are changing. Are we comfortable with that? Can we compete in that? Because when you look at Canada's trade relations, if you look at EU as a region, EU is our number 2 trade partner, not China. China as a country is number 2 trade partner. But when you add up Netherlands, France, Germany, and UK, we trade more with these 4 countries than we trade with China. So when you look at on a regional basis, EU is important. So unless we make a commitment to trading in Asia, unless we make a commitment to actually prepare ourselves to deal with that, to deal with some of these issues, okay, our natural long-term trade partners might actually be the Europeans and the Americans. But at the same time, we want to diversify away from the American market. So Canada has a real dilemma here. On one hand, we want to talk about diversification. On the other hand, we have a productivity problem. So these are things that I think Rcep has made us aware of. Rcep is actually a wake-up call for us. Rcep is saying, hey, Canada, look at these items. Think about your role in Asia. Think about your role in the emerging trade system. So Those are actually the two questions that I would leave with the audience and start my presentation here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wong. As I listened to you, I couldn't help but think, and this is probably for discussion later, the questions of terms of trade being locked in a relationship in which Canada might provide raw materials in exchange for advanced manufacturing goods. And that's tied, of course, to the productivity conundrum you raised. I just wanted to mention it in passing. Hopefully we will have time to discuss it. I don't know how the time will work out. It's now, at least by Eastern Standard Time, US 8:30. So we have one more presenter, an old friend and Professor Chahua Yang, Professor of International Business, Director of China Business Studies Initiative at the University of San Francisco, in San Francisco, of course. And she is a heavy publisher. She has published in numerous referee journal articles on topics ranging from internationalizations of firms, R&D strategic alliance, corporate social responsibility. So it's a pleasure to have you. I know I realize I'm doing short shrift to your biography, but I want to leave you more time. So about 10 minutes, that will take us to, what time is it in Mountain Time, William? You're muted.
Sorry, it's 6:30.
Right now we are about 6:30 p.m.
Okay, so we have about an hour, give or take, 10 minutes for you, and then 20 minutes for discussion with the panel, and 30 minutes for the general audience. So go ahead, please.
Thank you, Professor McIntyre, for the kind introduction. It's always actually nice to be last because you already have your colleagues, other speakers already covered many grounds. So I may not need to take all 10 minutes, but it's such a great jumping off point from Dr. Wang's remarks. So I would just say the impact of RCEP or Rcep on Canadians' relationship with China. You have to look at really different way. And I'm more optimistic though than some of my panelists. That's probably because I don't live in Canada. I simply don't know enough, so the pain is not inflicted on me. So I share some of their real concern, and also I thought, Dr. Henry Wang's points, give us a very different perspective. So with these two together, and I'll just say, the impact, as Dr. Wang said, Eddie Wong said, I look at the short term and the long term. From short-term perspective, my feeling is the impact actually may not be as much as you would expect. Because I think most, the business which have been operating, they're not going to stop because of ISAP. And from, if you look at Canada's trading relationship, most of Canada's exports actually to US, 75%. So if you look at the composition of the goods and services they trade with other nations, and with Southeast Asia, East Asia, the proportion is still not as significant. So from short-term perspective, I would even encourage Canada to, to really take advantage of this period of time when Biden administration is going to, begin to take a more sensibility and, reason in their policy making, and get along better with North American partners and trading partners. And just recently, the Canadian Pacific Railway bought Kansas City, Southern, and it shows me that this is a very strategic, smart thing to do. And While other regions have all kind of regional park, and why don't you fix what you have, what you already have? You know, the NAFTA is already there. Now we call it the USMCA, you know, a different name, but really essentially, you know, a upgraded, improved, you know, agreement, which has been working in many ways, benefiting all three partners, you know, generate a lot more trade, a lot more jobs. So there's saying in Chinese, saying that, you know, your neighbors are far better than your faraway relatives. So I would say in the short term, for sure, Canada should really strengthen, you know, their relationship with their own partners, and not to overly worry, you know, the relatives far away. But from long-term perspective, and as Eddie said, or you know, Ron said, you know, there are really concerns about you know, the Canada-China relationship and the need. You know, we have seen what happens that Canada, I believe that you know, really needs have more independence, need to stand up on the South. And I think this is something that Canada might learn from Australia. I live in Australia for many years. Australia has done, you know, nice job in keeping U.S. you know, in good graces while it does its own thing. Yeah, so it's independent in some way, but it also, you know, keep a good relationship with China. You know, well, you know, recently is not the best example, but for many years, you know, with China, other you know, South Asian countries, and with the U.S. Right. So you know, with such a small economy, not as small, but it's still, you know, you only have 30 million people. And so the interdependence is important, particularly from a long-term perspective. And the fact that Eddie said that the productivity, you know, has decreased, that does tell us that, you know, Canada need to build a better partnership with other countries other than just its North American partners, and need to diversify. So, and given the recent, you know, the issue with vaccine, and I have seen that Canada truly needs to be self-sufficient in some ways. You need to build your own capabilities in many strategic, vital industry, such as the pharmaceutical. Yeah, so that you can't, you know, rely on U.S. when U.S. you know, have to really supply its own people first, and you got locked out because, you know, you're only relying on, you know, U.S. or other countries for supply vaccine. And these issues are becoming, you know, I think, critical for Canadian policymakers to think, what can you do in the short term? What can you do in the long term? Where you need to diversify, and how can you engage in, you know, Rcep? And I think it's a good idea for Canada to engage, even though right now, I think, as Ron said, that the emotion is there. Probably, you know, it's before those kind of sensitive issues, emotion dealt with, it might not be the best time to actually pursue to become member of Rcep. But I think time will heal, given what Henry said, you know, he said it very well. You know, there's really a long, you know, historical connection between Canada and China, and that you can take advantage of, which other country may not have, and you have. So Canada, I think, it has a number of things that China and the Asians really always are fond of. You know, the fact that Canada is very friendly, always considered to be very friendly nation and friendly people. And those things I think you should take advantage of. But I would go back to saying Canada really needs to build some more independence in your own system, in your own policies, and build up your own vital capabilities in some of the vital industries. And meantime, again, never forget your neighbors, link closer with your neighbors. And you and Mexico have so many, I can see there's so many reciprocal, complementary, areas that you can really have some synergy that you can create. Of course, with the US, it's already naturally there, so Canada does have the many advantages that I can see. It's just probably not utilized enough. And I would strongly encourage the policymakers look into those areas that you actually can achieve your competitive and comparative and cooperative advantages. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Am I okay with time?
No, you're perfect, perfect. Let me raise some questions to which I do not expect an answer, and then turn it over to the panelists to raise questions among each other. The first question, which is sort of a prior question, what is the probability that Canada will or will not join the RCEP? I don't expect an answer. Is there a division between Eastern and Western Canada in terms of comparative advantages and relative appetite for joining the RCEP? Question mark. How will you deal with the United States? So close yet so distant on some issues. I know that it is within Canada to really stand up to the US. I've seen Pierre Trudeau do it. I'm old enough to remember. I don't know if you want to repeat that, but it's a question that you might want to consider. Somebody raised the question of comparative advantage. What is the unique comparative advantage of Canada, advantages of Canada in relation to China and RCEP, aside from the United States? And then finally, what if the United States Biden administration were to resume, it seems kind of far-fetched, a Trans-Pacific initiative led by the United States in year 2 or year 3 or year 4 of that Biden one, assuming it's not one, it's, there is a second term. But so anyway, these are the questions I wanted to raise sitting here in Atlanta, having spent time and studied in Canada and being very much an admirer of Canada. So the floor is yours. Who wants to go first? And please, if you want to ignore my questions, please do. Ron.
I'd like to raise something to my fellow panelists. That's, I think, relevant to Rcep and the regional economic integration. And I just want to point to the Australian model, or the Australia experience, rather. So there was a lot of doubt among Canadian policymakers that Australia would ever conclude a free trade agreement with China. And then they did so, and many were surprised and caught off guard. Rcep, others have already commented that it moved quickly when it moved. But for Australia, which is both a member of Rcep and has a bilateral free trade agreement with China, I mean, one can also question whether Australia has been able to reduce some of its vulnerabilities in the context of China. This is not just my language, but China weaponizing its trade and investment relations. So, I mean, Canada's caught in this dilemma where Canadians are very proud of who we are. And most Canadians will say that we will not put our relationship with China forward at any price. There's a limit to what we will do and the degree to which we will compromise our values and interests. And again, I talked about, and others have commented on the Q&A, that we've got Canadians detained in China that we think are detained arbitrarily, and that may be one reason why Canadians are not traveling to China as much, because they're afraid. And I know that's a fact, that many Canadian companies aren't doing that. But we've also been at the receiving end of Chinese actions against our canola, against our beef. When mid-sized countries or smaller countries become dependent on China for some of their sectors, China in recent years has acted in a punitive fashion. Australia has been hit very, very hard, ostensibly because of the displeasure China has taken with some of Australia's actions and comments. So I guess a question I would put to the panel is, I mean, how serious is this apparent phenomenon by China where they are particularly sensitive about criticism and where they take punitive actions in trade and investment to punish countries, especially smaller ones, where they're able to do that? And, you know, is Rcep and free trade agreements even worth it if China can take those kinds of actions? I know that might be a sensitive question, and maybe not everybody will agree with the premise of it. But for a small country like Canada, I mean, we're feeling pretty vulnerable, and we know that others are as well.
Well, maybe I say a few words. I will go back to what Henry said earlier. I would say one is it's really not you know, Canada's fault or Australia's fault, you know, for having these sentiments, for you know, the reaction. And on the other hand, it might not also be China's fault either. However, there apparently is a gap in understanding, in communication between these parties. And I think Henry hit home when he said, China, one is growing too fast. When you have a neighbor, when you have someone, you know, that you can see that, you know, it's suddenly, you know, burst, you know, it's scary. It's truly scary. Second is the narrative. And the narrative is not even there. You know, they never fully explain why they're doing something like this, why they're doing this, why they're doing that. And so the Chinese, you know, the government, Chinese, you know, firm, whatever, I don't think they have come up with the narrative. Maybe they're growing so fast, they don't even have the time to think about how to explain to the world what they're doing. And I think that is actually the problem. If they explain well what they're doing, I think we might actually feel, you know, the outside world may feel less threatened by what they do. And maybe there will be less misunderstanding. There, you know, will be less of issue of retaining, you know, the Canadian nationals or, you know, and et cetera, it's the other way. And I really think it going back to Henry was said that the narrative is a really the problem. I think the Chinese haven't, it actually shows me that the Chinese do not actually fully understand the other parts of the world. And I say similarly, okay, I would say the other parts of the world don't understand. As Henry said, so few people actually visit China. That actually creates a misunderstanding, huge gap in understanding, in communication.
Eddie, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I'm gonna. Now, I think. Let me follow up Dr. Yang's comment with a couple of comments. When I look at Australia and China, it reminds you of Canada and the United States. I mean, the Americans have not really have not been guilty of sort of throwing their weight around either. Softwood lumber, steel. I mean, these things happen on a regular basis. So it really goes back to the fundamental factors of international trade. In international trade, small countries lose independence. That's what the theory tells us. If you want to trade, a small country can gain more from international trade from a large country. But the price it pays is to lose its independence. Its terms of trade, I think John asked about that, the terms of trade will be dictated by the large country. The prices, the wage rates, they're all going to be influenced by the large country. But the thing is, so the question really is the benefit worth it? I think for Canada, obviously it's been worth it to be lying beside this elephant called the United States. For Australia, up until now, it was considered to be worth it because of the economic growth. I think fundamentally, what Dr. Yan points out is the fact that the difference today is that China has a different value system. The United States and us, we're very similar, even though we have a lot of trade disputes. it is still somebody that we can live with, we can deal with. I think that really fundamental. It's not a question I can answer, but it's a question the whole world is asking today, right? And it's not just China, Turkey. Turkey is rising. India doesn't have the same value system entirely as the West either. So this world is getting more complex. I think for Canada, we just have to get used to dealing with these differences. And I think we're just in the beginning of that. That's sort of my way.
Howard, you had a follow-up comment.
Yeah. So first of all, I want to mention something. I said Canada has really, I think, be patient. It's the only country. It's not the only country. It's one of the major American alliance country that has not rejected Huawei, right? Yeah, I think you got to appreciate that from Chinese side. Then you think about the timing. The European Union, the reason they rush to sign CAI, I think one of the reasons is that they see that phase one trade pact put Europe in disadvantage. So they want to take that moment before the Biden transition to sort of to put themselves in equal footing. What I try to say is that even United States in so-called trade war are not pulling away from very pragmatic economic dealing with China. So I think, we're proud of Canadian. I think we're very high in value, but the problem is, I think we're light on strategy, policy. So it's not a right or wrong. We just don't have that. I think Ron, Ambassador mentioned this. We're kind of a teenager. Our foreign policy is relatively immature. You compare to United States. You think about Henry Wang, there's think tank. Now China have a think tank now. What kind of strategic paper we have seen from our government? Even under Trump administration, they produced several very significant paper strategically against China, right? Target China. So have we seen this kind of a paper, the policy really laid out by our federal government? I'm not criticizing the current government. It's our, all our government in recent history concerning China, for example.
It's the dilemma of a mid-sized power, which requires a great deal of finesse when you're caught, as it were, between two, shall we say, superpower. And it's really hard not to mention the name of Graham Allison and his book of 3-4 years ago, the business of a rising power, challenging an established power, and sort of being caught in between with all of the choices attendant upon that. But I have trust that Canada can manage that really complex triangular relationship. And in fact, I would wager to say that it's an asset for Canada having signed an agreement with the European Union, which the United States couldn't do. It's still pending, as you know. William, do you want to, please?
Yes. Thank you for the panelists. I particularly like the Professor Yang's energy talking about the relationship on neighbors and relatives. In the case of when you're comparing Australia and Canada, it looks like Australia for sure is a neighbor of Canada. Is a neighbor of China and a relative of the US. And for them, relying on your neighbor is more practical. In the Canadian case, it's quite difficult because United States is both our neighbor and relative. And in that, in that sense, I do agree with all the panelists in terms of policy. on the high level, we already done some significantly, particularly in the western part of Canada, looking at the emerging of Asia Pacific region. The question is the follow-up, which Eddie also pointed out on the detail issues of how we handled the relationship from the detain of Meng Wanzhou of Huawei to the the prosecute of two Michaels, and all these things we have to handle it quickly because there's actually opportunities coming for the Winter Olympics early next year in 2022. If we can solve the issue, well, literally within 10 to 11 months, there will be a prosperous opportunity, particularly to resume Canadian and Chinese relation in that circumstance. Thank you.
On that point, if I may interject, it is true that the visa restrictions and various such restrictions in the United States on students, particularly in STEM-related disciplines, in a sense has been to Canada's advantage, because you're getting the best of China's advanced graduate students and postdoctorals in science and technology, which really find it problematic to. Anyway, that's just one example, but I did have a question. I am not sure I understand. I thought Dr. Wang had said that Canada missed an opportunity to have a Huawei investment to the tune of 1 or 2 billion Canadian dollars. That did not occur. Did I misunderstand that? William?
No, I think his point is that based on my secondary data coming from the media, actually Huawei looking at Canada very strategically, they actually want to invest more. The founder of Huawei, Ren Zhengfei, said several times, particularly after Meng Wanzhou was detained in Canada, he actually talking about there won't be any changes of Huawei's strategy in Canada. They actually want to invest more, and they put Canada as their theoretical research hub on the global level, because in Canada we have the far advanced AI research. Obviously, there's a less AI application, but all these three most important AI researchers are based here in Canada. So I think Huawei's strategy in Canada is that they emphasize more on the R&D, create job opportunity for Canadians, and also invest heavily in our major metropolitans. Also, they have a very interesting program connecting the North, which helping people far in the North side to have gain advantage of using technology, particularly access to internet, and potentially maybe in the future 5G. Thank you.
In this regard, I want to mention in passing that the Chinese Globalization Association has published 2 excellent books on Huawei with Palgrave, if you're interested. I have ignored you and I apologize, Xiaohua, you raised your hand.
Oh, I just want to add a comment on the impact of KAI on Canada's relationship with China. I think that's a part of what you also want us to comment, right? And I would, again, I'm far more optimistic in general than many people. And I think that there wouldn't be much negative impact of KAI on Canada's relationship with China, because Canada has a number of competitive advantage, which will remain no matter what kind of agreement they have, right, between Europe and China, or Southeast Asia, East Asia with China. Canada, the fact that Canada has so many natural resources, and that's something not every country has, and many countries will need when they develop their economy. And Canada has technology. And even though I think Ron earlier said the technology could be issue, but Canada, Canada technology is more or less in par because this, you are next to US, right? The powerhouse of technology. And so Canada is seen as actually a source of technology by many countries. And sometimes the other country cannot get technology from US, but they can get it from Canada. And Canada have it, So Canada can take advantage of this, It's really something you have other people don't have. Canada has such a wonderful fishing, industry. Remember when trade war started, China stopped importing seafood from US. And instead of importing, all these lobsters from Maine, they decided to went to Canada, right? Canada has plenty. So Canada has so many things to offer. And I just think that, even if you have, any, closer relationship between Europe and China, and what Canada offer, I think it will have very little, will be minimum impacted, at least in short term, by KAI in that regard, or even Rcep. That's
I think we have a few minutes left internal to the panel before we turn it over to the Q&A chat room. You made a remark about Canada's technology being a substitute for sourcing it in the United States, but I want to caution you that Canada is very much caught in the export control regime.
Yes, I am aware of that.
All right, Ambassador Hoffman, in terms of commitments.
Yeah, I mean, the technology landscape has become much more complicated. I mean, artificial intelligence is ubiquitous now. It applies to all sectors. I mean, export control regimes have become very difficult to manage for governments. It used to be simpler to know what products were for defense use, what products were dual use, but now dual use can apply to so many different things. It's become a real struggle for governments, and that's something governments have to contend with and figure out. And I think we're far from that, but we need to do a lot better on that.
I think, William, we have had a good initial discussion among the panelists. We've raised a bunch of questions. We have not answered all of them. I think Eddie has a last remark before we turn it over, because I see there's a bunch of Q&As there waiting for us. Yeah. Eddie, please be the last one before we turn to the Q&A.
Yeah, I think Ron and Dr. Yan pointed out one thing that I think that's very important, is the business culture of a country. I think a lot of what we do, how we react to things, and how we view our technology is really tied up with the business culture of a country. I think when we look at the competitiveness of Canada, a lot of our technologies are basically sold to the United States. And that is the subject of a lot of academic research over the years. Why is it that we don't commercialize them? And that has to do with the small country, with being small population, risk aversion within Canada. So those are things that are part and parcel of this discussion in terms of how we would deal with another country like China. I mean, it's hard to unravel all these different value system, habits, and also the mindset of the business community.
Thank you very much, William. We're going to turn it over to the moderator for the Q&As.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. On behalf of these questions, people put on through the chat box. I look at all these. We have about 9 questions. We already answered majority of them. There are 2 questions. Basically, were not answered. One question, particularly going to all the panelists, is the audience realize Canada, is in the economic size is relatively smaller than the U.S. and China in every respect. Apart from we are a huge country, the second largest in terms of geographical region. And Canada shall keep our principle, obviously, and also use the tactics available to handle geopolitical issues in terms of trade and investment. And the audience, one of the audience, the question is, USA is a friendly but not reliable neighbor in a sense, particularly when you look at the Trump administration for the past 4 years. And in Canada, we need to use other resources to grow us. The question is to all the panelists, how Canada can implement a simpler, effective approach towards China. Thank you.
I mean, if the floor is open, I'm happy to start responding to that.
The floor is open. If you want me to
Well,
go,
look, I mean, I think this has been a common thread through many of the comments by the panelists today, and that is that you know, China or Canada has some weaknesses in dealing with China. One, you know, our literacy rate on China is not very strong. Many of our policymakers, politicians, legislators, business communities, media journalists and columnists, their knowledge of China is very thin. We have many, you know, many people commenting on China, writing opinions that have never been there, have never studied it, and have very little firsthand knowledge. And that's a challenge for us. A result is that well, that's one weakness, but a compounding weakness is, and again, this is I think a weakness in our foreign policy that's been a constant in Canada. We've been having trouble as Canadians defining what our national interests are internationally. So we don't know that much about China, and we haven't agreed among Canadians what our constant national interests are. If you know, if you look at other countries that have deeper roots in the international community, the UK, I mean, Great Britain, Germany, others, parties can change government from one decade to another. Their stance on some international issues remain constant. It doesn't really matter who is in power in Germany, and you know, they're able to manage the dual impulses of respecting human rights and the values they have as a democratic nation, and their international economic interests. They manage sort of short-term and long-term, and they have a nuanced foreign policy that's multifaceted. Canadians have not done as well on that yet because we're just relatively new dealing outside of Europe and the US, are being dependent on that. And that hasn't made it easy for China. I know from my personal experience, my sense is that, you know, China respects consistency and strength. They don't respect partners that waffle around where they don't know where that partner, if they're dealing with a partner that doesn't know what its own interests are, that makes it kind of harder for China to deal with, and they get impatient with that. And if they're dealing with Canada that sometimes reacts strongly and then sometimes reacts weakly, it's you know, it's hard sometimes for the Chinese to know like how to deal with us. And when we appear weak, we make it a lot easier for China to punish us. I think if our foreign policy is clear, where we understand like who we are and what we want from the world, it's going to make it, you know, it will probably result in China acting more consistently with us as well. If they know that we're not going to, if they know that we're not going to put sort of any price on engaging with China for economic benefit, I think they're going to respect us a lot more as well. So our foreign policy, you know, our foreign policy needs to become more mature, more nuanced, and more sophisticated. But it also has to be based on a populace and a political class that sort of has a deeper understanding of China. Then we'll be able to know, where are we standing up to them? Where are we compromising? Where are we finding common ground where we don't have to stand up or compromise on issues like climate change? Where if we don't deal with, I mean, if China doesn't act on climate change, the world is in deep trouble. Smaller countries like ours can you know, are going to have an impact on climate change, but the world is not going to deal with a changing climate if China and India don't take a lot of actions. We have a self-interest in helping China move from its high coal dependence to LNG and cleaner energy. And we can also benefit from China's technology on solar and wind and other things. I mean, we have some common interests that we're also not dealing with, because we really haven't figured out what our interests are vis-a-vis China and how to deal with the range of them as part of our foreign policy. So that would be my kind of high level response to the question of how do we simplify our foreign policy and make our tactics more sophisticated.
It's got to be tough to develop constancy over a long historical stretch. When you, in a way, regarding China, you might well have two Canadas, Western and Eastern Canada, by virtue of closeness to the old world, mother country, whereas Western Canada is more Asia Pacific oriented. It is an Asia Pacific region, as it were, within Canada. Now, these two regions of Canada, overall overarching regions, are given equal weight in the diplomatic services of Canada, the intelligence services, and the corporate leadership of Canadian companies. So I'm sure it's very difficult to have that kind of constancy that you might find in France or in the UK, or perhaps even in Thailand regarding China, because of the nature of Canada, such a large geographic country with really different views, different perceptions. Where you sit defines how you see the world.
That's a fair comment. I didn't say it was easy. I just said it was important.
I understand. Yeah. It's a challenge.
Yeah.
Dr. Wong, you.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on Ron's comment. I think if you look at the ability for a country to formulate strategies, to make decisions, like Dr. Lin was talking about earlier, that's something that we need to develop in Canada as well. I think the fact that we've been enjoying a very high living standard, trading with one country over the years, has really given us a sense of complacency. And now we're just beginning to learn how to deal with the world. And I think in some ways, the model that China has used to develop its economy is something that we could emulate to some extent. And that is consistency, vision, a goal. But that's very difficult in a diverse country like Canada. I sit on a couple of committees at the Chamber of Commerce, and we all know that we need to do something. But how to get it done takes a long time, because the interests are so diverse, the perspectives are so diverse. And so that's something that I think that we're really at a disadvantage compared to Asian countries, whether it's Thailand, Korea, or China. I think that's something that they could effect much better than us. So I think I don't know how that's going to be changed, but that's something that would have to change before we can really come up with a clear vision, because that's what we need.
Thank you. Please, Xiaohua, please.
Let me add one comment to what Ron and Eddie said. The one more thing that Canada needs, being a small country with such a huge land, is that I think the policymakers, the country itself, should have more confidence in itself, and be very comfortable with what you have. You have some enormous advantages, and that you just probably haven't explored yet. I think that's one is the confidence. You need to even project that confidence. The second point is, Howard earlier said about supply chain. I think the pandemic, COVID, should actually be the alarm for all countries, including Canada. Particularly in this case, we're talking about Canada, is that you really can't be over dependent on one country, and that's really dangerous. I think that diversity, as you all said earlier, diversity is going to be very important. So time might right now it might not be the best time to try to squeeze into Rcep because of all the emotions, all the confrontations going on between Canada and China. But I think time will actually heal, and you do already have agreement. That's FIPA. And why not brush up the FIPA? In maybe a year or two, or even 3, revive that and update, and just like what Europe has just done with Kai, and make it better. And you really have something to build it on. So I would encourage policymakers in Canada, look at those issues, be confident, don't over rely, and and give some time to yourself, buy some time. Yeah.
Howard, please.
Yeah, so first I just want to mention that, some facts. Even after the trade war between United States and China, and even the pandemic, we have some company move to China like a Canada Goose, right? The other thing that I know that a Canadian business interest in China is actually growing, even during the pandemic. So one of the fact is that I have a friend at the CCBC, their membership actually growing during this period time. So anytime they have, the webinars and meetings, there's a lot of interest over there. I want to say the route to engage Southeast Asia, maybe the RCEP is a long shot, but the first thing that Canada should do is to really have an agreement with, how do you spell that? ASA, how do you call that? ASA, right? Sachet, yeah, with their Southeast Asia, because this is like a protocol, right? You have to have agreement with them. Then you can engage the broader, the regional partnership. So to talk about what is needed to make it happen, first we need some political capital. So try to avoid those missteps. We have some. Then we need, ambassador talk about the policy making. That take a resource. I think Canada, Xiaohua said a lot of good things about Canada. We have a lot of intelligent people. So I think really need to mobilize to see, to make the policy more sophisticated. It's more, even more transparent, I would say. Yeah. So
one of the questions we have is, does everybody agree that Canada should join Rcep? And I think, Dr. Lin, your comment is very important. Canada is also, Canada is seriously underinvested historically and even contemporarily with Southeast Asia. Our engagement has been kind of hit and miss. I know when I was an ambassador to several Southeast Asian countries, very hard to get ministers to visit. We were always lukewarm about joining the regional architecture of Southeast Asia. And now Southeast Asia is driving much of the wider Asian architecture. Even CPTPP, Canada initially wasn't very interested until Japan started negotiating, and we realized that we were going to be left out of the second biggest economy in the world if we didn't join, and then we scrambled. So our engagement with wider Asia has also been inconsistent. Several Rcep countries are also part of CPTPP, the TPP 11, but several are Rcep countries and not part of CPTPP, so we don't have any kind of formal trade agreement with them. Canada has for a long time been lukewarm in trying to get a free trade agreement with ASEAN or with individual countries within ASEAN. And I think to the credit of the government of Canada, they have now stepped that up and trying to explore that. The challenge is we're as usual, Canada's coming very late to the game. And these are countries that the world is coming to now, and we're kind of competing with everybody else. And our value proposition to Southeast Asia is not the strongest because our trade links are fairly weak with Southeast Asia. So we have to kind of work very hard to convince Southeast Asia that Canada is worth their while. But I think that has to be a top priority. If we could get an ASEAN free trade agreement, that combined with TP, with the CPTPP, puts us with privileged market access to much of the region. China is going to be very hard for the next little while. And negotiating with China in any case is very difficult. It took Australia over a decade to get that free trade agreement, and it's far from a perfect free trade agreement. So Canada's standard of wanting sort of quality agreements is one that I think has proven to serve Canada well. Take our time and get it right. But I think there's a lot more we can do across Asia institutionally, not just in free trade agreements, but also some of the wider regional security architecture that we've always been kind of underinvested in. Because again, we haven't really decided what our interests are in the region consistently. And I think there's more work we can do on that. But before I end my comments, I also want to do a shout out to our diplomats in China. Canada has a very, very competent, dedicated, capable team of diplomats in China. We always do. Our people in China are as good as anybody. The challenge is they know what's going on there. They give advice, but it's hard to kind of plug that in and get the rest of the political system to kind of accept it, because we've got a very conflicted society when it comes to China.
Thank you, Ron. Yeah, please, Juan.
I would strongly encourage Canada to consider joining Rcep, but may not be immediately, because you will have a lot of barriers right now. But it's important to be there, to join. Once you're a member of this kind of trading bloc, it gives you a voice. It's like a dinner table. If you're not at dinner table, you can't join the conversation. You have to be at a dinner table to join the conversation. I don't know that the cost of joining, you have to do cost and benefit analysis. If it benefits more, I would strongly encourage, Canada to consider join. Particularly, this is such a huge trading bloc, and you don't want to be locked out of this, particularly from long-term perspective.
Thank you. So we have one more question. Since we are in Alberta, people are quite worried about the cancellation of the Keystone pipeline construction. It's actually already started, but canceled by the current government from the US. And we always have the same question for a long time. How important is the Chinese market, obviously also the Asian market, for our oil industry, specifically to Alberta? Thank you.
I mean, Eddie, do you want to? You're an Albertan. I'm an Albertan. William's an Albertan. Do you want to answer that, Eddie? I know what I'm going to say, but that's going to be kind of predictable.
Yeah, I think you're not going to say the same thing, in William, because the Asian market is key for our future. We need that market. It's a question of infrastructure, prices, and all that stuff. I think that really lies at the heart of the dilemma as well, because when we talk about Asia, really the market we're really looking at is China for oil, and maybe to a lesser extent India, Japan, Korea for natural gas, right? So when you cancel the Keystone XL, what does that mean for us? Well, that means that we would, on the one hand, on the surface, we would rely more on Asia. But then my friend in the industry said, well, that's okay. We have enough capacity to actually replace Keystone XL, Line 5, and all the other pipelines. So I'm not an industry expert. I think Ron would probably know that better. So I would defer to Ron on that one.
Well, look, I mean, aside from the predictable arguments that we think we would benefit by getting our oil and gas to Asia, where China wants to diversify its energy supply, it wants more energy security. I think a very key dimension of this, which is often overlooked, is, 60% of China's energy still comes from coal. In the next 30 years, the oil and gas usage globally is still going to go up by about a third, until such time that the energy transition actually happens on a comprehensive basis. That energy is going to come from the Middle East. It's going to come from unstable regimes. China wants more natural gas. We can actually help address climate change by helping China reduce its coal consumption and move to bring more natural gas into the country, more LNG faster. I know not everybody will agree with that, but it's something that I think the facts bear out quite strongly, and it's an area where Canada would benefit, China would benefit, but the global climate will also benefit as we make this important transition to a zero carbon world, which is about 30 years out.
So I do agree with Eddie and Ron on this specific question on the oil industry importance and also the Asian market. Actually, not only oil, natural gas is the next wave. We already have, the most important, 3 state-owned companies invested heavily for the past 2 decades here in Canada. I did some calculation previously because I've been doing some research on CNOOC and also PetroChina. All over for the past 20 years, China actually invested in our oil sector for $50 billion. If you count almost 4 million population here in Alberta, each of us got $1,500 investment per capita from the Chinese market. So I think the question is how we look at the future development, because as people all agree, China is also leading in clean energy. And we are also looking at diversify our economy and upgrading also in the different energy choices. So I think we have a good opportunity working with countries like China in developing new energy solutions, clean energy approach. Thank you. Well, I don't think we have more questions. I don't know if panelists wants to quickly conclude for today your point, Will. If we want to take a few minutes, if you want to say a few more words. Thank you.
Maybe I'll go first then. I think to answer the question of how Rcep and CAI would impact on Canada, I think tonight's conversation is probably the first step. It generated a conversation. I think that is very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Eddie.
Look, and I would only say we need more conversations like this. The issues, we don't want to oversimplify the issues. They're complex, they're nuanced, they're multi-leveled. China's complicated. We also talked about the fact that Canada's complicated. And I think, I think the challenge is engaging with a major part of the world, not just economically, but politically, socially, in terms of climate, health, and so many other areas. We have a self-interest in engaging, but we need to do that in an informed way, a way where we know what our interests are, where we don't allow ourselves to get beaten up by a big player because we need to be able to stand up for ourselves. We need to be able to manage our conflicts and our agreements. We need to have a short-term approach and a long-term approach. And I think, the only way we're going to get there is through conversations like this that need to be multiplied many, many times across the country. And the HKCBA is such an important grouping. And I'm just very delighted that so many people are tuning into this important discussion.
Thank you, William, for the opportunity to participate from the point of view of the US, the South, Atlanta, and Georgia Tech.
Thank you. Thank you, John.
Yes, I want to thank
Again.
William for organizing
Thank you very
this.
much.
It's such an honor and a pleasure. And thank you, John, for moderating in such a skillful way. And it was a pleasure to be with other panelists. Yes, I truly hope that Canada will engage China with confidence and with deep knowledge and with sense and sensibility.
It is nice to know that that Canada has various strategies to engage China. I mean, it's not a single road to do that there are multiple pathways that lead to China, if I may say so.
One of the ways is people-to-people exchange. Bethune, right? Just this year, during the pandemic, one of the members of Bethune family, he married a Chinese girl. They just had their first baby. Yeah, so we kind of celebrate. We said the two countries would never break up.
Thank you. Thanks for the panelists. And I also want to thank HKCBA give us the opportunity to exchange ideas here. And I'm confident the conversation will continue. And thanks very much for all the panelists. And I do believe we will see Canadian flags next year during the Beijing Winter Olympics. We will get a lot of medals down there. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Wish you
Thank
best
you very
luck.
much.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Have a good
Thank you.
evening.
Bye.
Cheers.